Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we're focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Drive On. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and today my guest is Ruth Clare. Ruth is the author of the memoir Enemy, which explores her life as the child of a Vietnam veteran and the impacts of PTSD not only on veterans but also on their families. Ruth's journey includes personal struggles and insights that shine a light on the generational consequences of war. She's also a TEDx speaker who shares valuable tools for recovery from complex PTSD. And today we'll dive deep into her story and the lessons she's learned along the way, and all the way from Australia. I want to welcome you to the show, Ruth. I'm really glad to have you here.
It's very exciting to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the intro, I mentioned that you are the child of a Vietnam veteran who suffered from PTSD. Can you tell us about what it was like for you growing up with a parent who had PTSD in that type of environment?
Yeah, so I was born in 1974. My dad was a Vietnam veteran and he fought in the Vietnam War in 1968 to 1969. And PTSD wasn't even named as a psychological condition until 1980. And the way that they treated Vietnam veterans in Australia at that time was pretty much here's 2 hours of debriefing and off you go, don't mention the war.
Sure.
So my dad had been ejected from his experience in the military back into civilian life. He'd been one of the 16,000 conscripted Australians who fought in that Vietnam War. And so growing up, I didn't have any context. My dad didn't seek any help for PTSD, even after it was something that became more well-known in the psychological community. No one talked about the war. My dad didn't really interact with other veterans. I didn't have an identity of myself as the child of a veteran. I just knew that my dad got really angry really quickly, and I could never predict what it was that was going to set off his anger. So I might leave a bike in the yard or run through the house or speak too loudly or take him by surprise in some way, and he might just turn around and start beating the crap out of me. And so I spent my entire childhood just watching him and trying to figure out how what I was doing was impacting his mood so that I could either adapt to what I was doing or stop what I was doing or get out of his way. So it was pretty stressful and confusing because as a child, you think that everything is about you. And I thought his behavior was a reflection of the fact that he just, no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, he just didn't love me. And that I didn't know how to figure out how to change that.
Mm-hmm. That is basically the description of kind of the classic PTSD symptoms that you see in people, where they are just sometimes unpredictable. You don't know what's going to set somebody off. Is it a loud noise? Is it you sneaking up behind them? Whether it's intentional because you're playing as a child, you play those little tricks on your parents and you sneak up behind them and try to scare them or something. And as somebody who is dealt with PTSD myself, as you were saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, I know exactly how your dad was feeling in some of those instances. And I guess the reason why we want to have you on this show and talk about this, and you and people like you, is that I want to shed light on the fact that it's not just the soldier who suffers when it comes to PTSD. It does have other impacts on other people, which, back then, uh, even though, yes, PTSD was uh, identified as a mental health condition in the 80s, it wasn't commonplace for people to want to seek that type of thing out,
Mm.
that type of treatment, I should say. It was kind of taboo almost. Like if you went to go talk to a psychologist, it was like, oh my gosh, this person is crazy. Well, stay away from that person, right? And that was kind of the stigma around it. Um, but going back to what I was just saying, we now are recognizing that it has an impact beyond the soldier, to the families. If there isn't a reason to go get a treatment for the PTSD, the other, mental health conditions that you might have, do it for your family. Do it for the people that you love. Do it because you don't want to be that unpredictable person around your kids, around your wife or spouse or anybody. You want to be the type of person who they want to be around and know that they feel safe and loved and everything, despite the fact that as a soldier, you may, or as a veteran, you may want the best for them, but you may not be able to provide it. Well, get that help so that you can. And that's why as you were talking, I was like, this is perfect because this is exactly the reason why I wanted to have you on the show, to talk about this type of thing.
Mm.
Um, Now, your book, Enemy, tell us about what led you to write that book and the process of exploring your father's PTSD through the writing.
Well, it's interesting what you said about, the your child sneaking up on you, you're having that experience because my son loves to, he's now 13, but he loves hiding somewhere and jumping out and I'm like, mate, that does not fly. Stop doing that. It sets off my startle response in a way that it can often be angry.
Sure.
It's like, do not come out of the shadows and surprise me. It is not good for me. And trying to get him to understand that I'm never going to respond to that well.
Hmm.
That's my nervous system is, I'm still a work in progress.
Sure.
And um, one of the main reasons that I ended up, I once I had my daughter, um, I started to become more curious about what it was that had interfered in my relationship with my dad. He died when he was 52 from a melanoma cancer they say was related to his exposure to Agent Orange. So we never really had a chance to properly repair our relationship.
Hmm.
And I really mourned that loss because that relationship continues on inside you, regardless of whether or not the person is alive anymore.
That's right.
And it was when my son was 2 and he went through a phase of hitting, and I would just be doing whatever I was doing, not necessarily paying attention to what he was doing over there. But if he fell over or got frustrated or something happened, he would turn around to me and slap me across the face as
Oh,
if it was like out of nowhere, it was my fault. And the way that it works, especially with childhood trauma and complex PTSD from those really early childhood experiences, is that I'm sure you must have read the book Body Keeps the Score.
I haven't read it, but I know
Uh, yeah,
about it. Yes.
so that's like this seminal work about how your body has this memory. And this
Yeah.
is where all trauma lives in our body, which is why I think, body-based therapies are absolutely essential, and cognitive behavioral therapy has some massive gaps in actually the treatment of trauma. But so it was like that action that he took was so overwhelming to my system. It's like I was not in control of my body, and it felt like my rage was bigger than myself. And I felt, like inside of myself, I was shrinking down into being a child. And my son, who was tiny, felt like my father. And it was this really intense experience. And I came so close to hitting him in return. And it was the first time that I had genuine, because there was always, with a parent-child relationship, there's always a part of you that's a child and they're the parent and they should have known better and everyone wants their parents to be perfect. I think we all have this idealized idea. And I certainly entered parenthood thinking, I've done the therapy. I'm going to be great at this. And then you go, oh no, so hard, so many mistakes. I'm so sorry. And it was the first time that I went, oh my God, I might repeat this pattern. And I have done so much work and I have read so many books and I couldn't believe that it was still happening. I could not believe that I was feeling this strongly. And despite all of my best intentions, that I might repeat that pattern. And it terrified me. And so I felt like I had to understand more about my dad, to understand more about what this experience was in my body, what PTSD was as its own thing. And so Enemy was my way of attempting to do that.
That's pretty amazing, uh how you described kind of like the reaction that you had after that interaction with your child, how it kind of just set you back almost, and it was like,
Mm.
that's not where you want to be, as a parent. You want to be the one who's in control, in charge, and kind of calm, cool, collected, but every once in a while something comes up, right? And it makes you the opposite of that. um
Yeah.
and but in the writing process itself, um did you find it therapeutic to kind of go through this process and um identify some of these areas that you were writing about, or was it strictly kind of for you like research based and trying to figure that out, or was there a therapy component to it as well?
So I've been a professional writer since 2004, writing mostly copy, doing some journalism. And so I've read a lot about like writing as a process, and one of the things that I've read, and I feel like this is true, is that if you want people to feel something as a reader, then you've got to be feeling it as a writer. You've got to be reliving it and bringing it to life in some way. So I've had people, if you look at any of the reviews, there's a lot of people that sort of mention, oh, I had to, sudden tears would spring into my eyes. I was reading the book on public transport and it was a bit embarrassing because I would suddenly feel myself going, oh my God, I'm crying. And I did quite a lot of crying, but I'm quite a crier anyway. Now that I've had the therapy, oh, there's a lot of crying that happens. I'm much more comfortable with crying. So there was an aspect of, obviously you're going back over painful old terrain. But another thing that I use to inform the way I approach the book is that memoir, with when you're trying to tease out a larger theme, is that your story is just an example of the kind of story you're talking about.
Right.
So I tried to have an objective perspective on, it's not like I've had the worstest life and this is a It's, this is a thing that has happened. This is how it felt to me. And then I had so I had my child experience, which I really wanted to include what my child self made sense of those moments as I was growing up, because I think I wanted to give the reader an understanding of, you're developmentally limited when you're a child. You can't hold in your mind, I'm 3, you beat the crap out of me, I think it's all my fault. Even if you came in and had all of the oh, I'm sorry, I have PTSD and da, 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 it's like, your 3-year-old can't understand that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be true to what my reflections of that time were. And then I had another thread as an adult where I did do research, and then I interviewed other veterans, and then I looked at psychological studies, and I looked at the literature on the family experience of growing up with somebody with PTSD. And, some of the statistics were that children of Vietnam veterans have a suicide rate 3 times higher than the general population. And that feels like a significant thing.
Hmm.
And, there was a psychological study that was, and just looking at the prevalence of domestic violence rates in military families. And those factors, I think, are significant and worthy of mention as well.
Sure. Yeah, all of that I think is certainly worthy of mentioning in this type of narrative, and I like your approach to this as well, where your story is just the example, but
Mm.
it's being backed by other research, psychological studies, and other interviews uh, with veterans and other folks who are uh, kind of involved in this type of thing, who have experienced this in some way, and giving that as an example, uh, your story as an example gives people a more personal point of view, as opposed to just reading, a psychological study with a lot of technical jargon and things along those lines in it, that might be a little more dry of a read, if you know what I mean, as opposed to something with a more personal approach to it. So I like that's how you have taken that approach with your story. Now you talked about some of the challenges that you had growing up in this household, affected by the trauma from war. Can you talk about some of the maybe coping strategies that you developed and found or found to be effective in your own uh, situation, your own recovery from this, and how you managed to kind of keep moving on?
So I remember I read my first self-help book when I was 18, and it was a book called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. I don't know if anyone has ever. And what she talked about in that book, the thread, I guess, that was the most significant to me was this idea of the metaphysical creation of disease.
Mm.
And that's something that has actually been now backed by science. It was more woo-woo at that time. Her cover's got like a big rainbow love heart, and it's like, oh. But she was talking about this idea that it's similar to your body keeps the score,
Hmm.
is that if you don't deal with your trauma, then the way that I feel it, it's like, it just sits inside you agitating. And so that understanding that and kind of going, I could feel my trauma inside me. I could feel it, it's like its own beast in there. And
Unfortunately, I do
so,
understand what you're saying.
yeah. And so I started just to get curious, and I read book after book after book, and I tried lots and lots of different things. And I think that's one thing that I think every person on a recovery journey, I hate when there's I find that a lot of experts come in and say, my one method is the way. And there seems to be in some realms of psychology and that world of the expert speaking to the person who they're helping, they want to be more certain than they actually are, because not everything works for every person. And I
That's right.
think everyone's personal journey is really individual, and some things that are going to be awesome for me might not work for somebody, but there is always going to be something that will work if you keep persisting. It's just going to, be a lot of trial and error.
Hmm.
So I think the things that have been really helpful for me as concepts were understanding about control, because I think control is one of those major issues that is not spoken enough about with PTSD or complex PTSD, is we hate feeling out of control. And so we become overly controlling of our worlds and environments, because that feeling of chaos is just makes us feel unsafe. And so understanding about what I could control and what I couldn't control was a really helpful concept. And understanding that much as I would like to be able to control everyone and the things that happen to me and how everything works out, that's not what I can control. Is how I respond to the situation, how much work I do to keep myself calm. There's a limited number of things that I can control. And if I waste all of my energy out there trying to control stuff that isn't mine to control, then that's a lot of energy I don't have to direct toward what I can control.
Yeah.
And so that was a really helpful learning.
That is helpful because I'm in the very much the same boat where for the longest time, just trying to control things that were out of my control, and or things that were maybe not as significant as I was making them out to be. Um, other people probably might understand that as well. You mentioned earlier, you left your bike out on the yard when you were a child. Not really a major issue. Even if worst case scenario, the bike got stolen, you know, it's it's a bike. It's not the end of the world. It's not like you got kidnapped and you were taken away to God knows where. It was a bike. And yes, it would be upsetting if it was stolen, but not the end of the world either. Um, and there are things that you kind of have to look at them on a relative scale. How big of an issue is it? If you're reacting to everything as if somebody's about to get run over by a truck, well, then when someone actually is about to get run over by a truck and you're reacting the same way as if they left their bike out in the yard, they're going to kind of be numb to your response to how
It's
you're acting, right?
the size of the problem
Mm.
and the size of the reaction.
Yeah. And they
And
need to be
if
proportional.
everything's 10, then that's something that you need to work on.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're jumping straight to 10 or 11, and you're going to those extremes when the problem or the situation is a 1 or a 2 or something, and you're automatically going to that worst case scenario reaction. um, People will maybe eventually start getting numb or immune to that reaction where they're just not going to it's not going to have the same effect as if you were to use that 10 response sparingly for just 10 situations, hey, you're about to get hit by a truck, like
That's a good one. Use the
that's a
10.
good one. Use the 10 because you want someone to pay attention. You want to yell as on top of your lungs. You want to be loud. Make sure there's no ambiguity there. They heard you. They know exactly what's going on. But you left your bike out in the yard. That's, I don't know, a 1 or 2. That's a low level type thing. But if you're yelling like, "Hey, you left your bike out in the yard," and you're yelling, that's not going to be received the way you're anticipating it to be. Because to you as a kid, you were probably like, "Yeah, was it really that big a deal? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, yeah, sure, maybe I shouldn't have left it there, but you could have just said, hey, can you put it away?"
Yeah,
like,
but also get a grip.
yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a bike. So you were talking about some of the tools and the strategies, and you mentioned some like the science-backed tools that kind of aided in this recovery. Can you talk about some of the things that might be beneficial to some of the listeners?
So I did a science degree after I finished school, and I've always really enjoyed science. Never really used the science degree apart from just I really like researching stuff. And one of the things that has been absolutely foundationally mind-blowing to me is my understanding of the role of our brains and nervous systems related to our trauma response. Have you had people on here speaking about nervous system stuff before?
We have, yes. Yeah. And off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you which episode, but there have been some.
Put it in the notes. Put it
I'm
in the
going to
notes
put it in the
after.
notes. I'll go take a look, and there will be in the show notes,
So
which episode. So
the way that the nervous system works and the way that our brain works, I'll just give an overview just in case people don't go back.
Sure.
Is, if you have you heard of the hand-brain model, there's a scientist called Dan Siegel, and he's come up with this thing called the hand-brain model.
I haven't, but go ahead. Yeah.
So imagine this is your brain. And for people who aren't watching, I'm holding my hand up like a stop sign, and my wrist and my arm below, imagine that is my spinal cord. My palm of my hand is the limbic system, which is your emotional processing system. Thumb out here, that's the amygdala. And the amygdala is like the smoke detector of the brain that's constantly working to detect threats. And then that interacts with the limbic system down here. This is sort of your lower brain function. And then wrapped over the top is your higher brain thinking, reasoning, logic. So the amygdala is out here threat detecting, the whole time. And as soon as it detects a threat, it does this thing that he's described as flipping your lid. So it flips off your thinking brain, right? And what it does is then go, all right, now we're operating down here. I'm going to send, the smoke detector has gone off and I'm pressing the button on the fight, flight, freeze response. So it then interacts with the nervous system down here. And your autonomic nervous system is operating 24 hours a day to ensure your survival. It's the thing that keeps your heart beating and your blood pumping. And once the fight, flight, freeze response is activated in your system, it directs blood away from unnecessary things like digesting and moves it into your limbs so that you've got energy in those limbs to run away, and makes your heart beat faster so that you're already at a run so that you can run faster. It makes your breathing shallow so you've got more oxygen. And that's great when you're in the middle of a threat. But what happens when you have experienced trauma is that this thumb sitting out here, your threat detector, it becomes hypervigilant. Like it sees threat everywhere. It's so used to scanning for threat that it sees everything in your environment as a threat and constantly flips off your thinking brain and activates your fight, flight, freeze response. And people describe anxiety, but what anxiety is that fight, flight, freeze response in your body, heart beating too fast, shallow breathing, all of the effects that people, use to describe emotions. None of those effects happen without that nervous system response. So one of the biggest learnings for me, and one of the ways that I actually developed some self-compassion around the fact that I was being triggered, was to understand what just happened then. Was before I started going into my stories of, you're a fool, you'll never get over this, how much therapy do you have to do, why did you act like that, other people will be calm, blah, all of the stories that you tell yourself about how rubbish you are as a person. Before I get into that, it's like, oh, my system detected a threat then. So I'm going to calm the system down first before I get into the story. And so that process of calming the system down is, for a start, because what we do, the other thing that happens in your nervous system is it can't tell the difference between a thought, a memory, and real life. So if you get stuck in this loop of thinking about a past event, it's like, to your brain and nervous system, it's like, oh my God, this thing just happened again. Oh my God, this thing just happened. Oh my God, it just happened again. It just happened again. It happened again. So you get, it's like you just keep pressing the button on that fight, flight, freeze response over and over and over and over again. And the way that you counteract that is by coming back to the present moment. And, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm creating a whole course on how to support your nervous system. But there's a lot of stuff you can find if you just look up the polyvagal theory, or if you look up nervous system reset, whatever. There's lots of different processes you can use. And I've heard one of your previous guests talk about, having a cold shower. That's one of the things you can do. You're basically shocking yourself out of this lost in your thoughts over and over and over again, coming back into your body. So I use exercise. Like, exercise for me is like an essential. I do not know how people who have trauma do not exercise, because it is the one thing that helps to get some of it out and
Mhm.
calm some of that down. And then, breathing techniques, there's a technique called the box breath, which you may have heard of
Yep.
before, but it is actually, I don't know, did you ever get trained about that when you were in military service? Because I've heard that is something that I know.
They may do it now.
Right.
I got out probably 13-ish years ago. So back then maybe they did it.
Mm.
They didn't do it with me. I was on my way out. So if it was something that was starting around then, they probably didn't figured why bother. Um, but that may be something that they do now. I really don't know. I have heard about it and have used it in the past myself. But was not through military training. It was really just my own research and other uh you know tips from other people that kind of led me in that direction.
So that box breath is just a really simple breathe in for 4, then hold for 4, breathe out for 4, then hold for 4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. And one of the reasons that is so effective from a nervous system perspective is because when you are calm, you naturally have a pause at the end of your breath. It's that hold for 4 at the end, which is when you are in a really panic state, that's really hard to do. You feel like oh my God, I'm underwater. I can't, because you're
Yeah,
so in this, you're breathing all up here. You're not breathing from your diaphragm. And so that hold for 4 is in the same way that your amygdala is scanning your external environment, looking for danger. It's also scanning your internal environment, looking for, oh my God. And so if you give feedback to your internal system, which is, I'm going to actively control my breathing and pretend that I am calm, and that is a pretend calm breath, then that actually helps your amygdala go, oh, well, we wouldn't be doing this if we were running away from a tiger. So maybe it's not so bad.
sure.
And then, the other thing that I find really helpful is to take the world in through your 5 senses. What can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I touch in this moment? And every time, your brain's going to go, oh my God, but that thing and that guy that, let's go with the bike. That bike, but they're stupid. They don't respect me. Those kids, blah, 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 whatever, going on in there. And then you just go, what can I see? What can I smell? Right now, I am safe. Right now, it's all good. Reminding yourself that you are safe in this moment and nothing bad is happening now, and stop feeding your system all of this stuff that keeps it activated, because it's so much harder to be emotionally regulated if you keep overthinking and churning and churning and churning. So doing whatever you can, have a cold shower, eat some ice, crunch ice cubes, long, low out breath humming is like really calming for your nervous system. It's also a thing you wouldn't do if you were being chased. So it's sort of like, hey, little baby, it's all right. Calm on down. You're just trying to do things to remind yourself that in this, and do that before don't get stuck in the thinking part. The thinking part is just the very, very tail end of this process. And I think when you have got PTSD or trauma responses and your nervous system is, you have to do nervous system first.
Yeah, and it's really hard sometimes when you're in that moment to think about using a tool like that, like the breathing or uh, taking your 5 senses or any of that. It's hard to do it, but with practice. So if this is something that you do on a regular basis, even if you're not in that fight, flight, freeze mode, if you could just do that on a regular basis, then you are a little bit more conditioned. You're flexing that muscle a little bit more often. And then when it comes time when you are in that fight, flight, freeze um, mode, then it'll be a little bit more natural to do the breathing, take in those senses, all that type of stuff. It'll be just that much easier to do it because you do it when you don't need it. Just like you go to the gym, you don't need to be able to lift however many pounds over your head and do all these different, exercises. You don't need to be able to do that at that moment, but there may come a time where you need that strength, or you may need to run fast, or you may need to do that type of stuff. So you do it beforehand so that you're ready when you need it. So you're not out of shape and weak and all of that type of stuff. So,
And from a neuroscience perspective, that habit formation is about actually rewiring your brain. So instead of being your only loop is to go round and round and round and think about the thing and go round and round, when you've done the practices, when you are calm, you have, it's like a neuropsychologist that I've spoken to, she describes it as like you've got your super highways, and they're really quick. They're the ones that you've done all the time over. Those are the habits that are really entrenched and ingrained, and a lot of times they're not the great habits. And then you've got this road that's under construction, and it's harder work because you're going, oh, I have to think about applying the habit. But the more you do that, the more that becomes like, oh, we've got away some of those brambles. Now we've got a slightly clear path. We can step forward upon this new thing. And it does take some effort, but then it becomes a more habitual process, and then it becomes an easier process. And that's actually, it's hard because you're rewiring your brain. It's an active process.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a key word that you just said there, or key phrase, I suppose, because it's a couple words, but it's an active process, where you're actively engaged in this process. And that, I think, is important for people to remember, that you have to be active in this. You have to put the effort in. It's not just going to be like, oh, I listened to this podcast and I heard this great idea, and all of a sudden, click, it works. And you have to do. I mean, I wish
do
it
wish
was that easy.
I do wish that would be nice, wouldn't it?
I would blast this. I would promote this podcast all over the place. I'd blast it all over the world and just let everybody hear it. And all of a sudden, boom, PTSD
magic
goes away,
Yeah.
magically. That would be wonderful. But yeah, we're not there. We're not there. I'm not that good. Unfortunately, you're good, but not that good either. So, it is a active process. You do actively have to be involved, just like you can't have somebody else go to the gym for you and expect you to get stronger or faster or whatever, more flexible, whatever the case may be. You can't expect that to happen if you don't put the work in yourself. And again, going back to something I said earlier, a lot of this, we as veterans, myself included, we are the type of people who are the fixers. Oh, I can fix that. I can handle this situation. I'm big, I'm tough, I'm strong. I can handle these things. But sure, maybe you can, but when you look at a situation like PTSD and you're going through it and you're not getting the help that you need, it does have an impact on other people in your lives. It may have an impact on your family relationships, your work relationships, your neighbors, your friends, other people in your life. Uh, they are going to be affected by this if it doesn't go and get better. But it is an active thing, like you said. You're not going to just will it away or listen to a podcast and have it magically disappear, or any number of other things. Like, you actually have to do some work to get it done. Um, so yeah, this was good advice, I think, that you had in that breathing, kind of getting uh, that regulated and back under control. I found in my own personal experience that, as silly as it may sound, for people who have never done anything with their breath work or any of that type of stuff, it really works. I can't explain.
And it's really boring. It's really, really boring to
It is.
honestly, the number of times I still have to go, breathe. It's so boring, but
it works. So who cares? It's boring, but it works. You're not jumping out of an airplane, or you're not,
not high octane.
It's definitely not high octane. It is low speed, like it is, it's, but the nice thing about it is you could be sitting in any environment. You could be in your car in traffic, in rush hour traffic, or you could be sitting at your desk at work, or you could be at dinner with friends or family, or you could be at your dinner table at your house with your family, and you can be doing this and nobody's going to know what you're doing,
So
unless you're
I do,
really exaggerating the breathing and it's like
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's th three things that I do. One that I do a lot of speaking events, and the three things I always try and tell people about are the five senses, because you can do that secretly. And these things take very little time as
yeah,
well. They're invisible and they take very little time. So it's the five senses, the box breath, and the other one is feeling your edges. So noticing where your bottom is interacting with your chair, noticing where your feet are interacting with your sock, and where your sock is interacting with your shoe, and the solidness of the ground beneath you. And that is part of the process of, again, it's when you have been caught up, PTSD is a racing brain thing. There is a lot of racing brain action going on. And learning ways to come back into your body, to keep separating, going, oh, I notice my thoughts. I do not get caught by my thoughts. I come back to my body. Anything that can help you in that. And that process can be invisible and happening all of the time, because people inevitably say things that annoy me, and I have to, control my impulse to say inappropriate things in return, and you can do this thing of feeling your feet in your shoes. You distract your brain by doing these other processes so that you don't, you have at least enough of that brain hasn't flipped quite enough, that you've got a little bit of your thinking brain online. Because that's the other thing. If you have flipped your lid, your thinking brain is not online. You need to have these habits in place so that it is instinctive and automatic and can happen while you get this back online. So then you go, oh, I'm glad I didn't send that email or say that thing or have that response or do that out loud, that I walked out of the room or whatever. You thank yourself later.
sure. Yeah, because sometimes when that lid does get flipped, there's no unflipping it in certain cases. Like you can't unsay something, you can't unsend that email, you can't, take some of those things back. So
But
when,
you can say sorry. And it's a thing
yeah,
that,
well, that's true.
I, my dad, um, never, I, in a very flipped lid state, confronted my dad about some of the experiences, more like, do you remember when you beat the crap out of me when I was 2? Do you remember? Like a really, very professional conversation that I had with him. It was like, I was 18. He got on the phone to me and whatever. I just started, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Right. And the way that my family generally works is things get brought up, people ignore them, and then we pretend they didn't happen. So it was like, okay, so I had this thing that I thought, okay, well, this could be the beginning of a conversation. And then that got completely ignored. And I'm like, okay, I can say whatever I want, because apparently everyone's just going to pretend I didn't say it. And then when it was my dad's 50th birthday, I'd moved away. I was living in Melbourne, and I got this phone call at 4 a.m. Dad had a habit of calling when he was drunk. And it was, slurring on the phone. And I was really annoyed because I was trying to, pretend I was cool. I'd just moved to Melbourne and, was trying to really put all the past behind me. I'm going, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening here. And he said, I know you weren't lying. And I was like, I don't even know, he was drunk. And he's in the middle of a conversation and he said, I'm going, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Lying about what? I know you're not lying. When I said I gave you a touch up, your sister told me that I did. So they had obviously been drinking together that night. And I was like, why is it that when my sister says it, that it's not a lie? And when I said it, it might have been. And then I explored this in Enemy. I was like, so did he seriously, was he lying or denying, or did he not remember? Was it disassociation? It was so confusing.
Mm,
And one of the other children of a Vietnam veteran who read my book. She was an only child, and she said that her family was similar in that her dad said that he didn't remember those experiences. And she said that, in her letter to me, she said that for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a witness to what had happened in her own home because her experience was so similar to mine. And I'm sure that if I hadn't had my siblings, I would have felt like I was going crazy to have something so really obvious denied. Both of my siblings had very, similar perspectives on everything. So I at least had that validation. And I think, if my dad had have said sorry, it would have made a really big difference to me. I was ready to forgive, but it was really hard when it felt like it was okay. So we just pretend, and I just sit there the whole time going, are we going to ever talk about it? No. Okay, well, we can only have a relationship that is at this level if we're not going to talk about that thing.
Right. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that's how people are sometimes. And, I wish it was different. I wish we all could just figure it out and snap our fingers and have this go away, or at least, like you said, apologize for the behavior. However, with the apology, any apology, there, I always tell this to my kids as well. With an apology, just saying sorry by itself with no change in behavior, it's an empty apology. So you did that thing, whatever that thing was, that was wrong, and you go to apologize for it, but then you turn right around and you keep doing that same thing over and over again. That sorry really didn't mean anything, because you're still doing it. It's like, I'm just saying it now just to get you to shut up and move on with this. And it's almost the same as just brushing it under the rug, like you were talking about, like just kind of ignoring it. Just trying to get through that one moment and just saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then continuing to do the same thing. So again, it's an active process. There,
Actions speak louder than words.
they do, and you have to be actively involved um, in the process of getting through this, and you can't just
But
sorry
repair,
your way through it.
repair can be, one of the most profound, we all make mistakes,
Oh yeah,
my God, there's no parent alive that hasn't made a mistake.
that's right.
But repair matters. Repair counts.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and that's, I think, the goal here for everyone. So, I didn't bring you on the show to make the folks who are out there dealing with their own PTSD, make them feel bad that they're bringing their trauma onto their family and all that. I'm talking about, how do we fix this? How do we take those first steps and um, get the help that we need? And you said this earlier. Um, a lot of times there's experts out there and they say, oh, this way is the best, you got to do this way, and that's the only way, and blah blah blah. I know the Department of Veterans Affairs here, they have their list of prescribed therapies and
Same
medications
here.
and things, that they go through. But sometimes people go through all those and they don't work for them. They get through and they're like, okay, now what? Because I still feel the same as I did, however long ago when I started this whole process, and it's really not helping. There are other things out there. There are other ways of dealing with this. So for the folks who are listening to this, who are going through it, try all of the things that are available to you. Try the stuff that Veterans Affairs has to offer.
And try some of the woo-woo stuff. Like, some of the woo-woo stuff is, go in there as cynical as you like. I always just consider the proof is in the pudding. I will try anything. You want to wave a fish over me and tell me that it's, wafting away some negative energy? I'll give it a crack, and then I will just trust my own experience. But
Yep.
if you're open to things and go, oh, whatever, they don't know, just because, and this is the thing with, even though I do like science-backed things, and, they try and make psychology and mental health as if it's like X plus Y equals Z, we all are. They don't know. And they only measure what they have measured. As a scientist, it is, when I did my degree in science, they hadn't mapped the DNA. It was all just junk DNA. It was junk DNA. That's junk. It's like, so far as you know now. And just because they haven't measured why some energy works doesn't mean that it doesn't. It just
Sure.
means they haven't measured it. The people who get the most scientific studies are generally like cognitive behavioral therapists who want. They're the types of people who do the studies. It doesn't mean that the other things aren't as valid. It just means they haven't had as much research applied to them. It's just.
Right. Right.
Mm.
And yeah, when you talk about the data, they're looking at numbers, they're looking at statistics, they're looking at all that type of stuff. But I mean, meditation or the breath work or the
Oh, 100%.
all these things, yoga, or I don't know,
All of the
painting,
stuff that
something.
brings painting, like, for me, the one of the biggest ways that I have dealt with my trauma is through my creativity. I was an actor before I was a writer. I've done a lot of work where it's like, you give form to your pain. Like, this is in a therapeutic process rather than a, necessarily showing the public process.
Mhm.
And then, I would do this thing, like there's this thing called emotion focus therapy, where all you do is, basically go inside and try and feel where it is in your body. And actually tuning into where it is in your body, because you're so used to avoiding it. You're going, I don't want to know anything about that stuff. You go into your body and where it is inside your body, then the therapist says, and does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Blah, 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 blah. And sometimes that's all you do. And then you don't keep thinking about it all the time and going over and over it. You just have this shape, and that becomes a symbol. And then you let that symbol sort of live. Like, often you will give form to it. So I had a therapist where you would draw that out, and then you would just sort of like, it felt like, okay, I've got this nugget of something, and then you'd sniff around it, just look at it on the wall, whatever it was that at that time, but not think about what it all meant, just kind of sniff around that symbol. And it feels like it lives outside of you. You have a separation instead of feeling so immersed in all the yuck. So that process is valid as well. And that would not meet VA approval
I'm sure
standards,
it
I'm
wouldn't.
sure.
I'm sure not. Yeah. There's so many things out there though, and I think the key to all of this is keep trying, keep
Mm,
trying different things.
mm,
Don't just stop because you've exhausted the VA's resources and the things that they have to offer. Look outside the
mm,
VA. Check
mhm.
out some of these woo woo
And there's
things
so
that you
much free
talked about.
stuff too. If you don't have any money, because that's the other thing, go onto YouTube. YouTube is gold mine.
It
And,
is.
obviously you want to have support if you're in a really crisis state there, you need to be getting on those phone lines. Do not be doing all of this stuff by yourself,
Sure.
and connecting with community, from a nervous system perspective. One of the most healing things you can do is to remind yourself you're not alone in
Mhm.
your experience. It's one of the reasons that I wrote Enemy, is to go, you are not alone in this. And there are, just being around other people who are more regulated than you, it's proven that a more regulated person can help you to calm yourself down. It's like we need each other. We need to be able to be around others who are doing better than us, and then we can be the person who can be doing better than them on a different day.
Right.
And to it's not all you're bad, they're good. It's sometimes you're better than they are. So it's like we all do it for each other.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, this conversation, honestly, I've had a great time in this conversation. This has been a really enjoyable conversation, not only um, because um, it's been uh, personally fulfilling, but I think the listeners will take something away from this as well. I want to mention your book again. The book again is called Enemy, and I want to make sure that the listeners know where they can go to find the book and get maybe more information about you and type of stuff that you do. So before we wrap this up, could you provide the listeners with that information?
Sure. So Enemy should be available like on all of the booksellers. Should be available definitely Amazon. It's also available as an audiobook, and that's just been released worldwide. So hopefully that is all properly taking place. But it's really weird when you're not in the country that you feel like, I don't know what you guys are seeing. You might be able to see it, you might not. I don't know if you can buy it. I took over. It was originally published by Penguin, and then I've taken back the rights and self-published it, and I'm not sure I'm doing it properly. So I may have messed up.
Well, I am looking right now at the Amazon page for your book here in the US. And I can see it's available on Kindle, audiobook, and paperback
Right.
editions. So all of those are available here. So you definitely can get a copy of it here in the US. And I will have the link to those versions of the book in the show notes so that the listeners here and hopefully Amazon's smart enough to figure out if you're not here in the US that they'll redirect you to the country of website of your particular location so that you can get the book too.
I think Bezos is pretty good at making
I mean,
sure
they're
he gets
pretty
the
good.
money no matter where we are in the world.
Yeah,
I believe
yeah.
it's one of his skills.
Yeah, he's kind of dialed that in, I think, just a bit. So he's done pretty good with that. But I'll have links to that in the show notes, like I said, as well as your social media and website and things like that. So folks can find out, kind of follow you and find out more about what you got going on. Before we wrap this episode up, though, I like to end with a little bit of humor. I kind of think of it as in a restaurant, you have dessert at the end of a meal and leaves you with a good taste in the mouth, right? So, I like to end the episode with a little bit of humor, especially because sometimes some of the topics we talk about are a little heavy, a little dark, and I like to at least leave people with a smile on their face, even if it's just to laugh at me because the joke was corny and they don't like it. So, whatever,
You
you
do
can laugh
dad
at me
jokes,
too.
don't you?
I do.
It's a dad. Yeah.
You, is it really that obvious? Like, yes, I do dad jokes. I don't know if this qualifies as a dad joke. You can let me know afterwards. But so here we go. So a man checked into a hotel. There was a computer in his room, so he decided to send an email to his wife. But he accidentally typed the wrong email address. And without realizing it, he sent the email to a widow who had just gotten back from her husband's funeral. And the widow decided to check her inbox, expecting to see condolence messages from relatives and friends, things like that. And after reading the first message, she fainted. And her son rushed to the room, found his mother on the floor, and saw the computer screen, the email on the computer screen, which read, "To my loving wife, I know you are surprised to hear from me. They have computers here, and we are allowed to send emails to loved ones. I just checked in. How are you and the kids? The place is really nice, but a bit warmer than I expected. And I'm and I'm very lonely here. I have made the necessary arrangements for your arrival tomorrow. Expecting you, darling. I can't wait to see you."
No, that was really good. The warmer than expected really added the twist.
I I added that in because I was like, this is good as it is, but warmer than expected.
Yeah,
That send a little twist to people.
It's slightly menacing now. Yes. Yeah.
Well,
And yeah, no, I'm totally rating that. I'm going to tell that one.
that's good. Yeah, please steal it if it helps put smiles on other people's faces. I definitely want people to steal that and use it. I stole it too. I'm really not that funny. I took it from somebody else. And unfortunately, I didn't write down who the joke came from, so I can't quote the author, but it's out there. I'm sure if you really care to find it, you can find it. Um, but anyways, Ruth, thank you again for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your insights. I'm sure we could have gone on for hours talking about this and sharing the different aspects that of the PTSD of your own trauma, dealing with all of this. We could go on for hours, but I think the key takeaway here key takeaways here for the listeners is be actively involved. It's an active sport here. We're not just passively watching TV and or watching a podcast or listening to the podcast and expecting that this is just going to magically get better. You have to be active in it. And think about the family. Think about the family members that if you do nothing and you continue down the path that you're going down, how are they going to be impacted? And is that really something that you want? And I think all of us in the veteran community, we kind of look at each other or look at ourselves as the protectors. We're the ones who protect other people, and uh, let's do that. Let's bring that back home and protect them by taking care of ourselves. And I think that's the takeaway I have anyways. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I love that framing, and that's even, for me, as I'm not a veteran, but I feel like, I had my own childhood war.
Sure.
And it, for me, constantly wanting to be a better parent is the thing that motivates me the most. And I think, sometimes you do feel like you're a worthless piece of rubbish that isn't worth doing it for yourself. And sometimes having the framing of going, but I love those people and I want to do it for them, can give you more motivation than just trying to do it for yourself, for your own blah, 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 blah. Sometimes having the other framing of I want to do it for them can be the impetus you need to make better changes and make different choices and start making some active behavioral changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Ruth, for coming on and sharing this and the wonderful insights. And I'm really glad that we got to have this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.